Hello, everybody. Welcome to Cool Sports Guy. I'm Tom. Joining me today is Jarrett, and we are going to talk some football. Jarrett, how are you doing today?
It's pretty good. This is like the first time in a while I haven't just done picks.
That's that's good, man. Good to have you back, and I'm glad you're still freezing on us there over there. It's going to be another fun episode for that. Um, we're gonna jump right into it. We do have a few topics to go through today. We're approaching the very end of the regular season, which typically would have been this week, but this year they starting moving from now on. They have another week of football, so just adds entertainment value, I guess. So we're gonna start talking about the Dolphins, who's on a 7 game winning streak as we speak. It's a 7 or 6.
I want to say it's 7 now.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
sounds right to me.
After the Saints win, I think it's 7 because that's 15 games that they played. Yep, that's 7. They went on a 7 game losing streak, and then they went on a 7 game winning streak.
They're the
So
first team in NFL history to have both a 7 game losing and 7 game winning streak in the same season.
I don't think I ever even thought of that. That's pretty good. So the question here is: are they all flukes, or are the Dolphins actually good? I'll let you take this one.
I know like earlier on in the season when it came to like the picks and the stuff, I was kind of on the Dolphins bandwagon, and I thought that they were playing better than that they were a better team than how they were playing. But at the same time, I know that they're on a 7 game win streak, and it's a hot streak. They look pretty good in some of those games. And if you look at their wins, they don't have wins against many good teams, if any teams. I mean, there was the Patriots week 1, but that's with rookie Mac Jones in his first ever career start, which is kind of, I don't want to say fluke, but it's kind of fluky. I know they had some injuries to some key starters throughout the season, and that's probably why they had some of those losses. But then they all lost teams like Jacksonville. No teams should lose to Jacksonville. I think that it's more so that they've just had a really easy schedule the last 7 weeks. I mean, the Saints are normally a good team. They were down to Ian Book, who's literally never thrown a pass in the NFL before that game, and they didn't even come out. They beat I want to say it was like relatively like close, and I think they could be a playoff caliber team, but I feel like it's very similar to the Bears last year, where the Bears had a good record to start the year, and then they were awful the second half, and then sneaked into the playoffs. I feel like it very well could be a similar situation, but opposite, where they started off awful and then were super good at the last half, and then snuck into the playoffs. I feel like it could be a similar situation, but I don't see the Dolphins being that good of a team in my eyes.
Yeah, and the craziest thing is I just kept seeing that, okay, Dolphins just from the beginning, they beat the Patriots barely, and they went on a 7 game losing streak, and we started thinking, man, they suck. But then the more you think about it, you look at it, most of those games, at least 3 of them was within inside 3 points. It was a field goal game. And about the other four, the only concerning one that I saw was Bills because they lost to the Bills twice, and one of them was 35-0 blowout. Um, but 7 game losing streak, you think season's over, and then the next thing you know, they go on a 7 game winning streak. You're thinking, oh yeah, the Dolphins are good again, and I kept thinking the Dolphins are good again until you asked the question, is it a fluke? And I looked at who they beat, and like you said, they beat the Texans, the Ravens, Jets, Panthers, Giants, Jets again, and then the Saints. So there's not a single one. There's one team in here that's going to be in the playoffs. Everybody else is already eliminated from the playoffs, and the season isn't even started yet, or over yet. I'm sorry. So do I expect the Dolphins to make the playoffs? They could. They very much can. They have the Titans and the Patriots coming up, which I think is extremely tough games. If they find a way to win those games, which by the way will show maybe a little bit of respect on Dolphins at that point if they do win those games. Um, if they actually do win those games, they can make the playoffs. But even if they get to the playoffs, I 100% think they're going to be one and done, considering the teams they beat considering the teams that they lost to so far. But yeah, I mean, the beating the Patriots 17-16. Go ahead.
And you can go ahead.
No, go ahead.
One thing I want to add is in that losing streak, a lot of those games, the quarterback they had was Jacoby Brissett because Tua was out with injury, which I know you're not as high on Tua as I am. But I think Tua, honestly, is just a lot better quarterback than Brissett. Like, he won't make as many big plays because I don't think he has as big of an arm by any means. But he's just more consistent and doesn't turn the ball over as much. And I feel like that has a lot to do with I feel like Tua is kind of a lot like a Teddy Bridgewater, where you won't put huge numbers with him at quarterback, but he won't turn over the ball a lot, and he'll at least, like, West Coast offense style kind of get it down the field. And I feel like he
bridge
has a lot to do with the winning. Yeah, I wouldn't say a bridge. I'd feel like he has potential to get up there and get more confident with the arm and throw a lot more deep passes, especially with a receiver like Jalen Waddle. I just feel like he's not there yet. And I feel like even with that, I think he's better than Brissett. I think that if Tua was starting all of those games, I think maybe they would have won another game or two, in my opinion.
Well, if they would have won one more game, they would be in much better position to make it into the playoffs. But again, as we speak right now, it's going to be a tough going. We're going to move on to another team that's hoping to look to make to the playoffs, and that's the Raiders. And, it's can the Raiders potentially sneak into the playoffs or not? My quick answer would be no. And here's the number one reason. Here's how the Ravens season went. They won 3 games, and then they lost 2 games. Then they won 2 games, and then they lost 3 games. And then they won 1 game, and then they lost 2 games. And then they won 2 games. And if you look at that schedule, it doesn't matter if the teams they played had a winning record or losing record. Nothing mattered except for one thing. They were extremely inconsistent. So since they won the last 2 games, I'm going to say they're going to lose at least one of their next 2 games, which, by the way, they play the Colts and they play the Chargers, which the Colts game, they may have caught a break because I don't know if you heard, but Wentz is on COVID list right now, and I think he's supposed to miss the game coming up. And if that's the case, the Raiders might have a slight chance, but at the same time, Carson Wentz isn't really doing too much with the offense right now. The offense, the running game, and the defense just is winning games. So that's going to be still a tough game. Chargers blew them out early this season. I don't know if you remember that game. They went up like 21, I think, nothing through the first 3 quarters. Raiders came back and put up 2 TDs in the 4th quarter. Chargers went and put up 1 more, put the game away, called it a day. And if I remember correctly, Derek Carr threw a pick late in the 4th quarter to put, to help ice the game as well. Do I think they can sneak into the playoffs? No, I don't, because right now, after the wild card spot, you have the Chargers, and then after the Chargers, you have the Raiders. So Raiders aren't even in the wild card spot. They're 1 game behind, or they're 1 team behind, potentially making the wild card spot. They still got to play the Chargers again, and they got to beat the Colts. And you got to hope that some of these other teams who are already in the wild card or playoff spot loses a few games, the next 2 games, or at least 1 game coming up. I don't think all of them going in their favor right now. It's going to happen. So, no, I don't think the Raiders can sneak into the playoffs.
Well, the thing with that is I think I would kind of agree with you. I don't see them making it just for the fact they're very inconsistent and they have a very tough end to the season. Like, the Colts are not a team you want to be playing right now. They're probably the hottest team in football, and they look borderline unbeatable. I will say with the Carson Wentz thing, I think starting today, the NFLPA, NFL, and CDC came to an agreement. It no longer needs 10 days of isolation if you're unvaccinated and test positive. They lowered it to 5 days. So there is still a chance that Carson Wentz will play. It's still kind of going to be tough for that to happen. in the little like limited amount of time we have, but it is possible. So we're looking at like Sam Ehlinger is going to be the starting quarterback, and this will be his first career start. But like you said, like Carson Wentz, I think has a very underrated season. But at the same time, they don't really rely on him to do that much. They, when you have Jonathan Taylor, who I would probably give the MVP to this year, you don't need to be throwing the ball all that much. And then the Raiders, I don't think have that. The Raiders' defense isn't great to begin with, but I don't think they have that good of a run defense. Especially now that Jonathan Abrams, who's one of their safeties, he's not really great pass coverage, but he's good at stopping the run. He's now out for the year, which doesn't help in their already like weakened run defense. So I think I would, just based on that alone, I don't see them making the playoffs, because not only that, but you have to beat them and Chargers next week. With the Chargers are a very good team. They're when they want to be, I guess, because the Chargers are also very inconsistent. But I just don't see them winning two of those games or both those games, and then having other teams lose games that they need to lose. The only benefit I give them is that the team that they have competing will also have tough schedules. I don't know about the teams below them, but I know like the Dolphins currently have the 7th seed, and then the Chargers are right outside of the playoffs with the 8th seed. If the Raiders lose to the Colts but beat the Chargers, they jump above the Chargers. And if the Dolphins lose one of their next two, which I could definitely see given they play New England, then they actually have a tiebreaker over the Dolphins with the head-to-head matchup, so they would take the playoff spot over the Dolphins. But that's completely ignoring all of the teams like the Ravens or Browns that are below them. So I think it's definitely tough. The benefit that they have is that it's kind of in their hands to see how it goes, but they do have a very tough schedule, so I would lean towards no.
So I don't think it's a benefit, because I don't think it's necessarily in their hands, because the very best they can do is win 2 more games. But if which one of them wins would include Colts, who's already a game ahead of them, but so the worst case they can do is tie it up, and then the other team is the Chargers, who's already outside of the playoffs looking in. So, but if you look at the other teams, if Colts win 1 out of the next 2 games, Colts will still be in it, because Colts will have a better record than the Raiders, even though Raiders did beat the Colts. They'll be a wild card spot looking in. You look at the Dolphins, if they find a way to win the next 2 games, or at least one of the next 2 games, they'll be in, because if they beat the Titans, that's, Dolphins have Titans and Patriots coming up. Like you just said, if they lose to the Patriots, they lose 1 game, but they're still 1 game ahead. And if they beat the Titans can afford to take a loss and still be in the playoffs. So some of it, or most of it, is actually not in the Raiders' hands. Most of it is actually depending on how the AFC shapes up. The rest of the AFC shapes up in the next 2 weeks. So if Raiders really wanted this to be in their hands, they should have won at least 2 more games earlier in the season. But right now,
some very ugly games, including the Giants game. But
yeah, who would have thought? But also, I just want to make a quick point real quick as far as you saying Carson Wentz is underrated this season. I don't think he's underrated this season, because you immediately backed it up with, well, they haven't really having him do too much this season. He's played good, but he hasn't been asked to do too much. And he's just, I feel like, done good enough. So I don't necessarily think he's underrated. I don't think he's overrated, but definitely don't think he's underrated. But, and yes, I think Jonathan Taylor should win MVP. We're going to move on.
Just a quarterback award, he would definitely win it.
Yeah, for sure. I don't see why not. Even with it being a quarterback award, who are you going to give it to? I don't think, as great as Brady's numbers look, I don't think he's played consistent enough throughout the season to win it, in my opinion. Rodgers, I feel like should be ahead of Brady to win it this season as of right now. Mahomes, same, kind of inconsistent throughout
the... Mahomes was too inconsistent at the beginning of the year.
Yeah. So then it comes down to Rodgers or Jonathan Taylor. And at the end of the day, I think Jonathan Taylor have
I-
done more
I'm
for
throwing
teams.
Cooper Cup in the conversation. I know I'm kind of like I'm kind of on the Cooper Cup bandwagon, and I have been for years. I think he definitely deserves to be in a conversation. He's had debatably the best season a receiver has ever had.
Hey man, listen. I'm not arguing that. He's on my fantasy football team, and I'm in the finals.
Got me to the
All
Super
right,
Bowl in the.
I got one more. I'm trying to run it back to back because I won last year, and I got one more game. And if
I
I win
also
this
won
game,
last year.
nice. Did you win this year? Are you gonna win this year?
I've been to the Super Bowl. I think I'm gonna
nice.
win. I had the best record in the regular season too, specifically
Same.
because Cooper Cup has carried.
Same. Same and same. All right. So we're gonna move on from players to coaches real quick, and I know we partially talked about this beforehand, but maybe we've changed our minds on this. Should coaches be fired, or should teams fire coaches mid-season?
My whole thing here is so they if those of you who don't know, if they were like made a new rule starting in week 15, so after week 16 is over, you can start interviewing coaches of other teams like coordinators if you have either fired your head coach or let your head coach know that they won't be returning for next year. And I feel like that's a huge benefit. And I mean, because some teams don't really know what they're doing, apparently, like the Bears, don't know they're going to fire their head coach until after the season, even though there's an obvious answer. But it benefits teams, like the Jaguars or the Raiders, where starting now they're interviewing coordinators and they kind of get a head start. And I feel like, I don't know 100%, but if I'm a coordinator, the teams that come talk to me first and make feel like they want me to be the head coach, I feel like that would make me lean more direction. And so the teams that have a open first, they're getting the first opportunity to talk to these people. They get more time with them. They get first dibs, and I feel like that's overall huge. And maybe if this was like last year when this rule wasn't in effect, I would disagree with you. But now I feel like that's just such a huge advantage over teams that wait, that there's not really a reason. If you know that your coach is going to get fired in the season, like with the Bears, with Matt Nagy, if they bring Matt Nagy back for another year, I think there will be riots at Hallis Hall. There's no way he's coming back. So therefore, I don't see the point of just dragging it on and overall hurting the team by keeping him there. I know the Bears in their 100+ years of history have never fired a coach in season. This is as good of a reason as any to fire Nagy. I don't see a reason to keep him around.
Yes, coaches should be fired mid-season if they need to. So here's the only alteration I would make to that. If taking it away from mid-season, there's oftentimes, we've seen so many teams start off and halfway through the season, they won 2-3 games and they look like absolute trash. But the second half of the season, they kind of turn it around and they do such a great job. For example, I know this isn't the best example, but look at the Dolphins. They won a game and then they went on a 7-game losing streak, and now they're on a 7-game winning streak. Now, the Dolphins are kind of a bad example, but because of the teams that they beat, but you get the point I'm trying to make. So should they fire them halfway through the season? Probably not. Oftentimes I would say, hey, wait 3/4 of the season and see how that goes. And if you need to get rid of them, get rid of them. And the reason I'm supporting getting rid of them mid or 3/4 of the way through the season is only if they know for a fact they are going to get rid of this coach after the season. It's because one, it just kind of like you mentioned, it gives the offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators, whoever it is, to kind of step up and show what they got for a couple of weeks, show their coaching skills off. And that could potentially, even if it's not with that particular team, that could potentially give them job offers on other teams. So that's definitely one reason. And the second reason, like you said, is because, if you want to interview other people, start looking for other people, even just throw out there saying, okay, just fired our coach. We're definitely looking we are going to need a new coach next year. Just so other offensive coordinators or assistant coaches, whoever knows that, okay, I can potentially have an opportunity here. Thirdly, and this is probably the most important one, you should, if you feel like the person should go, for the simple fact that you as the ownership of the team should let your players and other teams know that you don't tolerate incompetence. So if you feel like a certain coach is just not at all helping, or if they're hurting the team, and you're going to say, our season's lost, we're going to wait it out, we're going to let the coach, like, no, get rid of them, right? Make changes like as you see, as it needs to happen. So even if it's halfway through the season and you feel like a coach is just absolute crap and you got to get rid of them right there and then. Your season's lost anyway. Why are you holding on to this guy? He sucks, right? So I think that's definitely a reason to do that. So yeah, my answer is yes. Don't wait till the end of the season. If you know for a fact you're going to fire somebody at the end of the season, then you have your answer. Fire them now. Get rid of them.
When I bring it up, I don't mean just like fire coaches immediately. I mean like if a coach deserves to be fired and you know you're going to fire them at the end of the season, just get it over with. Like, think about it this way. With the Jaguars, and I knew from the very beginning Urban Meyer was a horrible choice as head coach. And it didn't take long to figure that out. I'm not saying fire the man, we agree. But once it got to the point where, all this stuff's coming out, like he literally kicked his player. I could go for days about everything Urban Meyer did that was wrong. But I think the Jaguars were smart firing him when they did, and now they get these first dibs on these coaches. Now, with the Bears, think about comparing the two teams. What do they both have? They both have potential to have franchise quarterbacks with Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields. Urban Meyer was obviously not helping Trevor Lawrence. I know rookies struggle. It's kind of how it goes. But rookie quarterbacks with potential that both of them do, should at least show flashes. And I feel like neither of them have really shown that many flashes, which I know I'm kind of talking bad about Justin Fields for the first time in my life. But I think a big part to do is their coaches. The Jaguars were smart and got rid of Urban Meyer. I know for these last few games he's going to have a head coach than he will next year, most likely. But if you keep a head coach that's hurting them, by keeping them for longer, all you're doing is hurting them more. Matt Nagy probably has been nothing but hurt Justin Fields' development, which getting him out of the building as fast as possible will benefit them. And I think that there's no reason Nagy. He seems like a great guy and all, but he's obviously not a good coach, which the last few games he's been calling plays again. And I don't know if you've noticed the plays being called, but they are horrible. The Matt Nagy special of we run the ball up the middle, we do wildcat with David Montgomery and make him run up the middle, or we run all of our receivers run hitch route. That is all we do when Matt Nagy calls plays, and it never works, and it makes no sense, and I hate it.
Okay, he calls good plays. The defense understands that as well, and that's why none of them works. Okay, let's get that very clear.
I feel like part of calling good plays is making it unpredictable, so the defense doesn't know exactly what we're doing every time.
He didn't know that part.
Which also, I think it was a scam that we hired Nagy in the first place. At the time, I was all for it, but he didn't even call plays in Kansas City. He was like a game manager, offensive coordinator. Andy Reid did the entire offense. Nagy just kind of stood there. And we're like, yeah, he's from Andy Reid tree. Let's hire him, even if he has no idea what he's doing. If he wasn't calling plays, maybe he would still be a head coach at the end of the year.
Yeah, and sometimes people they're great coordinators. That does not make them great head coaches, right? And that's just simple. That's just a simple fact of life. I mean, so many offensive and defensive coordinators, they do so well, they end up winning Super Bowls, and the teams are like, this guy's great. And then you take them away, put him as a head coach, and the next thing you know, they're like, we're not really interested in this person anymore. Like, their head coach had a lot to do with why this coordinator was a success. If you look at Josh McDaniels, he went to Denver, Denver was thinking the best for him, and then he went right back to New England because, well, Denver was like, oh, well, your old coach just beat you. That's not going to work out for us. So, maybe
He also,
Nagy
remember when
needs
he
to.
backed out of a head coaching job with the Colts?
Oh, I remember that. That
They
was
hired Frank Reich. They had an agreement with McDaniels first, and then he backed out to go back to New
yeah.
England.
That was Robert Kraft's way of saying, haha, thank you for Deflategate. Here you go. That's what you get. So, but hey, you know what? Frank Reich is not at all a bad head coaching hire. If anything, I would say he's probably a better head coaching hire than McDaniels. I mean, McDaniels is really good with offenses. I don't think I've seen him enough with defenses for me to say he's going to be really good with defenses. But either way, moving on, we're going to talk some NFC. We're going to talk about the Green Bay Packers. Jarrett, since you're a Bears fan, I'll ask you this. Are you, I'm sure there's not going to be a biased answer here. Do you think the Packers are the best team in football, or are they just, full of holes?
Okay, first off, I want to start by saying I feel like other than picks with the Bears, I feel like I'm pretty non-biased when I talk about the Packers or the Vikings or Lions, I think the Packers are a very good football team, and I'm kind of horrified to see them in the playoffs because I think they can make a Super Bowl run. But what I will say, I don't think they're the best team in football. I think their defense does not impress me. Their offense, definitely, Davante Adams looks unstoppable, and literally no one can slow him down. Their defense, I feel like, just doesn't do enough. I think, they have some good pieces. Kenny Clark, nose tackle, I think, is debatably the best nose tackle in football. Their linebacking core is pretty good. And then Adrian Amos, former Chicago Bear, is good. And then quarterbacks, I know Jair Alexander's been out like pretty much the entire year. Other than those, there's just kind of holes everywhere. And they've allowed like 30 points a game to some bad to mediocre offenses the past few weeks. And they won some games that they definitely should not have won, and their record shouldn't be as good as it is at the moment. I think they I didn't get to watch the whole entire Browns Packers game because it's Christmas. I'm kind of whipped, so I don't get to watch all the games I want to. I have seen the last Baker Mayfield interception, which how that's not pass interference, I don't know. It literally held the man the entire time as the ball is being thrown. I don't get it. I'm not going to delve into that one play, though. They barely beat the Browns by however many points. It was a one-score game, and Baker Mayfield threw 4 interceptions. If you only win a game by 1 score when the other team throws 4 interceptions, that doesn't look so good for your team. I know it's great to get interceptions, but with interceptions, you need to put up points, and they didn't seem to do that much. I think that they're a good team, but I could name several teams I think that are better than them and more overall, like all around good. And you seem to be laughing like you don't agree with me.
So I do want to say something real quick, which I do think is very funny. I'm glad you said you didn't watch the game and it was Christmas Day and you only caught the end of it, and I totally understand. Packers scored 21 points off of 3 of Baker Mayfield's interceptions. Every single one of his interceptions, the following drive was a touchdown. Not the following drive, the drive the offense took over from there and it resulted in a touchdown. So as far as getting points off of the turnovers, most of their points came from turnovers. So that's why I started laughing, because he said they don't seem to be doing that. But I'm like conflicted in this, right? Because one, I agree with you. I don't think they're the best team in football, but they're not so much like full of holes, in my opinion. You don't go full of holes and just win as many games as they won. They're 12-3. They basically have the best record in all of football. Not basically, they do have the best record in all of football, SEC. So no, they're not full of holes. they can very much potentially win a Super Bowl because let's face it, they've clinched one more win and they will clinch home playoff. They'll clinch number one seed, and they can very much just go on a run. And you got to go through Lambeau, and going through Lambeau is hard. Even last year, Bucks went all the way to Lambeau to play them, and the game ended in 5 points at the end of the day. And it definitely didn't look like it was even going to be a close game at halftime. Packers were losing, I think, by like 14 points or something. So it's going to be hard to beat them at home. So and I told you, I think a week or two ago, Packers are going to make it to the Super Bowl. This is going to be, that was Jose, I'm sorry. If Packers are going to make the Super Bowl, this is the year. I think Aaron Rodgers is playing so good. And the Viking game, I mean, they went back and forth. That was a really close game. The Saints was the only blowout they had. But they are beatable. I wouldn't say they're full of holes, but they're definitely a beatable team. Any given Sunday, there are teams in the NFC, especially NFC is so top heavy. Like, can the Rams beat the Packers? Yeah, of course they can. Can the Cowboys? Yeah, they could. Can the Bucks? Yeah, they could. So can any of these teams potentially knock the Packers off? Yeah, absolutely they can. But is that something you just look at the Packers team and the way they play so far and go, oh no, these teams are not. They're for sure going to beat the Packers? No, definitely won't say that. I will say this though. This is the first and only time I'm actually going to argue for Baker Mayfield. Well, I don't want to say only time. I don't know what the future holds, but this is the first time in my life that I've actually ever kind of argued for Baker Mayfield. And here's the thing, Baker Mayfield overall, in my opinion, and you and I kind of texted back and forth a little bit towards the end of that Packers game, which he for sure played like crap. He, like you said, had 4 turnovers. But I do think that last turnover was such a huge deal, and we dismissed it because he has 3 other turnovers in the game. The very first turnover that actually happened in the first quarter, there's about 8 minutes and 40 seconds left. He actually threw the ball about a good 30, 40 yards into midfield. Same exact thing happened. The receiver was being held and pulled on the entire time all the way there, and nobody seemed to have called it. Ball got picked off. But I'm a lot less angry about that first interception than the last interception because of the simple fact of situational football. 1 or 2 calls or 3 or 4 calls go bad, especially in the beginning of the game. You make mistakes in the beginning of the game. If you make up for that, you can still come back and win a game. But you make crucial mistakes in the end of the game, which oftentimes cost you games. And that's the same thing for calls. Refs miss 1 or 2 calls in the beginning of the game, and like, for example, the very first interception, I don't think it was Baker Mayfield's fault, but I'm not going to get angry about that because you have more than 3 quarters to make up for that. But in the very last minute of the game, when you're about 15 yards away from getting into field goal range to win the game and put it away, and you throw an interception, and it was, like you said, an obvious call, that puts the game on the line. And in those sense, it doesn't matter how terrible he played, no matter how bad a single player played, the Browns, the team in general, played good enough to keep the game still within 2 points, and they still put that team in position to win that game. So just from a Baker Mayfield standpoint, sure, he played horrible. He didn't deserve to win that game after turning the ball over that many times. That last interception shouldn't be the only factor to why you lost the game. But if you looked at the Cleveland Browns as a whole, no matter how many mistakes Baker Mayfield made, they still put that team in a position to win, and I think that was just a horrible call. Just wanted to go on that rant. The Browns should have won that game. I don't think the Packers should have won that game.
One more thing I'll add, which this is going to be the biased side of me. I feel like there's a few teams that just get all of the calls that they benefit of the doubt, no matter what. I mean, Packers, I think it's blatantly obvious. I think the entire NFL has realized that at this point. You could say teams like the Bucks get calls. I know they have Tom Brady, and officials seem to like star quarterbacks and just give them wins. But I feel like it's so blatantly obvious like that. I don't see how they don't throw a flag on that. Which like I said, I only saw the end of them, so I saw like that part, which they were kind of driving down the field, and I like, obviously I don't go for the Packers. I know I picked them to win and whatnot, but I don't ever want. I pick them to win. I don't want them to win. And when the Browns were driving, I was like, oh, all they need is a field goal. I know, Baker had a relatively bad game. They were driving down the field, and I think that one call just completely gave the game away. Which I think that pass interference calls or penalties should be able to be challenged. I know it takes away like the human error of it, which some people like, but like at the same time, I'm not even a Browns fan. Imagine how a Browns fan feels watching that game. You're in the playoff hunt, you may not even make the playoffs, and you're about to be one of the best teams in football, and you lose because of a terrible call like that.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and I think when I don't think one bad call or one bad play should mean that if that's all that's going to cost you to lose a game, then you never had the game won to begin with. It's my opinion. But that being said, when it's in a critical situation, when it's in a critical moment, when especially the Browns right now, they're playing to keep their season alive, those calls mattered. If you think about it, if you go back to the Seattle Patriots Super Bowl, do you remember how many picks Tom Brady threw in that game?
I do not off the top of my head.
He threw 2, and the reason I bring that up, right? Oftentimes you say, well, if you lose turnover battle, you often lose the games. He actually threw 2 interceptions, but the one interception that everybody always talks about is Russell Wilson's, and it wasn't even that horrible of an interception. It was just a great defensive play. The 2 interceptions Tom Brady threw in that game was just terrible interception throws. That's all it was. It wasn't that somebody made a play. No, he just threw 2 bad balls. Reason I bring that up, his interceptions happened in the first quarter. In the second quarter, he went back and put up 14 points. Happens in the third quarter. Fourth quarter, he goes back and put up 14 points. Russell Wilson, who played pretty fairly good throughout the entire game when the game was on the line, again, it's not necessarily a bad throw. It was just a good defensive play. But on the goal line, on second and goal, at the 1-yard line, 20-some seconds left, he throws a pick. That pick seals the game, right? Just like that, one bad call, one bad play shouldn't matter unless it's that late in the game in such a close game. And yeah, I definitely got frustrated for the Browns that day because they got robbed. They got robbed hard. I don't want to keep ranting on this. I'm sorry. I'm turning into you with Matt Nagy. And I never thought I would argue for the Browns. It's the Browns. Who cares? I will end in this note. Even if they would have won that game, they're not going anywhere. Let's leave it at that. It's the Browns. So we're going to talking about the Browns, talking about going somewhere. I have a list of sleepy Super Bowl teams here, and I figured you have the same, so I'll let you take this one. Who you got? Who's
I actually want you to start with this one.
Oof. Okay. So I broke mine down to AFC and NFC, and I realized one huge thing that I always said, but then it kind of really hit me. The NFC is so top heavy because I looked at the playoff teams and then like 1 or 2 wild card teams, and then after that it's all like you're gonna be eliminated, you're gonna be eliminated, you're gonna be eliminated, and then there's teams in the AFC where we talk about teams like the Chargers, who's currently sitting on the outside looking in, and they're still dangerous if they make it in. I truly believe that. So NFC is very top heavy. It was really hard for me to pick a sleeper Super Bowl team from the NFC, but the term, sleeper Super Bowl team, it's a team that people are sleeping on. And I think Rams might be one of them just because they just had a bad month of football not too long ago. It looks like they're starting to kind of bounce back. They just kicked the Cardinals' teeth in. Cardinals are starting to have a bad month, but the Rams are starting to look like they're kind of somewhat getting back on that pace, getting back to the winning, mentality and groove. and they currently hold the division title over the Cardinals as we speak. And if they win 2 more games moving forward, boom, they're in the playoffs. They get a home playoff game. I think a lot of people are sleeping on the Rams. Rams are not a team to sleep on. They still have a really good defense, even though it looked really spotty throughout the season. They still have Cooper Kupp. That's not something to forget. OBJ is starting to play a little better every week. I feel like he's starting to build that connection and rapport with Matthew Stafford. And Sean McVay, I talked about this a few weeks ago, how, he has a lot of combination plays for Jared Goff, and he's simplified the offense so much more for Matthew Stafford because Matthew Stafford is that much more skilled. Maybe he's saving those plays for the playoff time, and maybe he'll come up with some crazy, play for the playoff times. So Rams are something not to sleep on. Everybody besides the Cowboys fan, because of Cowboys hatred, sleep on the Cowboys. I'm going to continue to sleep on the Cowboys, I think, too, because it's the Cowboys, and I just don't see them having it in them to go win. But that being said, man, if they get going, they remind me a lot of the Bucs. When the Bucs get going in a game, they're borderline unstoppable. And if the Cowboys get going in a game, once they start get going, they're borderline unstoppable, as we just saw in the Washington game. So if the Cowboys, they get into the playoffs and they get into rhythm on every game that they're playing and they keep going, it's going to be hard to stop them. Cowboys are my secondary sleeper pick. I think Rams are a bit more scarier for me. AFC, on the other hand, I got 3 teams. I got the Colts, which I think a lot of people are starting to wake up on right now. The only questioning part is right now they're going to be playing the Raiders without Carson Wentz. If they can win this game, they end up playing the Titans one more time, and I very much think the Titans can win the game. The second one, and I think if the Colts make the playoffs, I don't care who's playing the Colts. Don't just think, you're a wild card team and you're just here for the show. We're going to beat you. That's not. I don't think that's the case. This is a team that started 0-3 and they lost 2 games since. Bengals, I'll be extremely honest. I definitely slept on the Bengals. I don't even think they're going to end up making the playoffs. They currently hold their division title. Now, given their division's kind of falling apart, but that being said, Joe Burrow's playing really good. The defense is playing really good. That entire team is also something to not, be overlooked. This weekend, they're playing Kansas City. I think that's going to be a very interesting matchup. That could be a potential matchup you see in the future in the playoffs one more time. So, especially if the Bengals beat Kansas City this week, that's going to open a lot of eyes, and people might finally admit. Actually, I don't even think people are going to admit the Bengals are good. I think people are just going to go back to, Chiefs suck again. And then lastly, it's the Patriots. I think a lot of people open their eyes and then close their eyes because they lost, 2 games to pretty good teams. I still wouldn't sleep on them quite yet, for the simple fact that they still have Bill Belichick. And oftentimes, if you saw him once and you beat him once, if you see him again, later in that season, there's a very good chance he is going to learn more about you from the first matchup to bring to the second matchup than you are going to learn more about the Patriots to bring to the second matchup. So that and obviously I'm talking about the Colts here. And if the Patriots and the Colts meet again, I don't think the game is going to be that much of a blowout. Do I necessarily think the Patriots are going to win? I don't know. I feel like it can go either way, but I don't think it's going to be as easy as it was just last week. So those are my picks.
There's quite a few picks there. I definitely do not have as many. For the AFC, I didn't know if I wanted to include the Colts just for the fact that I feel like at this point they're not really slept on. I think everyone kind of understands that they're a great team.
That's fair.
A team from their division, I think, kind of slept on, which is the Titans. I feel like the Titans, people know that they're a good team, but people couldn't see them in the Super Bowl. My thing with them is, once they get out of the regular season, they're supposed to get Derrick Henry back, which if that does happen, I feel like they're a very slept-on team. Even without him, they've looked rather impressive. They're getting the best running back in football back on their roster, And not only that, it's not going to be like the past few years where they give Derrick Henry a bajillion carries a season and he's kind of like tired when he gets to playoff time. This is going to be a relatively fresh Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
Which, come playoff times, I mean, obviously not all teams because some teams are from like the South, but for the most part, like the weather is relatively cold once it gets to playoff time. And I feel like power backs like Derrick Henry or AJ Dillon with the Packers, those running backs succeed more in the playoffs because they wear and tear down that defense, and by the end of the game they're like completely gassed to the point where like the running back can carry it. I think the Titans are very slept on once they get Derrick Henry back. I think for the NFC, I was going to say the Rams, but they are now leading their division. They're on a hot streak, kind of back in the swing of things. Another team that I think that is slept on mostly because of injuries is the Arizona Cardinals. They've now been knocked out of they were the best team in football record-wise most of the season, and now they're not even leading the division. They lost to the Lions. They lost to I just blanked on me who they just played. But point being,
they lost to the Rams. They lost to the Lions. They lost to the Packers. And then they lost to somebody else recently too.
I can't remember who they just played this week, who they lost to. But the point being is I feel like pretty slept on.
Colts.
DeAndre Hopkins, was it? Oh, yeah, it was the Colts. Because obviously the Colts are a great team. But DeAndre Hopkins is going to be back during the playoffs. James Conner didn't play in that Colts game. Kyler Murray is kind of on an odd streak, which I feel like can be fixed once it gets to the playoffs, kind of like a Rams situation, just having like a bad month. I know this is a long shot and it probably won't happen, but J.J. Watt could potentially come back. Who knows? I could.
If J.J. Watt comes back for the playoffs, I have no choice. Because, dude, let's face it, this is going to be it. I think this is his last year. If JJ comes back for the playoffs, I have to root for him to get to the Super Bowl, man. I have to.
If JJ Watt comes back, I'd probably give.
If Watt comes back for the playoffs, and he's going to give it all he's got, because this is probably going to be his last year, and they face off the Bucs in the playoffs, I think that's going to be one of that's going to be the only time where I go, Brady, I'm okay with you losing today.
I know it's like not likely, but it's probably a long shot, but it's honestly not impossible. First off, it was with his injury, like the return timetable was, maybe a little after the season ended, but J.J. Watt has shown in the past that he heals better than like anyone else, kind of miraculously. And I could see maybe not the first game of the playoffs, but I could see him coming back for a first Bowl run, because given this is going to be like this is the end of his career, or I assume this will be his last year. Maybe he'll try and play for a few more, but this is the end. He doesn't have a Super Bowl. I could see him kind of come back for this team, so I would throw the Cardinals in there as well. Another team which.
Now you got my hopes up. Now I hope he comes back, and now I'm starting to secretly root for the Cardinals because I want them to win a Super Bowl. What? I don't like you right now.
Another team which you're going to find pretty bizarre of me to mention, given how much I hated on them throughout the whole regular season, which you could probably guess what I'm about to say. The San Francisco 49ers, I could see making a run. I know that's very bizarre for me to say, given how I hated on them the entire season. Their defense, pretty dang solid. Their offense, I think, with Shanahan, I don't know if he's a great
you don't know what you're talking about. Tom, the 49ers suck. Tom, why do you keep rooting for all these teams?
Listen, I can admit when I'm wrong. And Shanahan, I think, is a good play caller. I don't know if he's a good head coach. Maybe all they need is play calling with how good their defense is. And if you think about it, whenever we get to the picks for the playoffs, you're going to want to pick the higher seed every game. which is normally the case, there's always like a 6th or 7th seed dark horse who just decides to go and wins the games. And when I did sleepers, I wanted to pick a team that was on the bottom end of the playoffs. And I wanted to pick one in the NFC because, they're very top heavy and you wouldn't seem to give them a chance. But I'm going to throw the 49ers as my dark horse. I think that when they get going, I know G might be out for the rest of the season with his torn ligament in his thumb. But I know Trey Lance has a lot to ask from a rookie quarterback who played for North Dakota State. But if Jimmy G comes back, I'm going to pick them as my dark horse because I think that defense is good. The offensive line is unbelievable, and their running game is pretty solid. And they've played well against good teams. They put up a fight against the Packers. I'm counting the Bears as a good team in this. They put up a fight against the Bears when the Bears are playing probably their best football of the year.
Can I ask, do you have any other teams or?
I think that's going to be it because you kind of named all of the other ones. I just wanted to point out if you didn't name.
You just mentioned if Jimmy G comes back, do you think Jimmy G is hurting or helping that team? Honest question.
I think Jimmy G. Okay, listen. I want to say he's very inconsistent, which I know I use that word at least 17 times every episode. He's inconsistent, but in some games he looks like he's a superstar quarterback. In other games he looks atrocious. Depends on what Jimmy G you get each game. I think that Jimmy G could be a big factor in them winning games. I want to say this because I trust him a lot more than I trust Trey Lance. Trey Lance, doesn't have much NFL experience, and he didn't even play that good of teams in college. So I think Jimmy G gives you a better shot.
Well, Jared, look, sure, Jimmy G looks really good on some weeks, but here's the thing. Can he look good for 4 straight weeks? Because that's how long it takes to win the Super Bowl once you get into the playoffs, right? Because they are gonna be in wild card. They got to play wild card round. They got to play divisional round. Then they got to play the NFC Championship game, and then they got to get, if they win all 3 of those, they get to the Super Bowl, and you got to win the Super Bowl. Jimmy G is like Andrew Luck and Sam Bradford had a kid because that's how often he gets injured. Right now, he has a messed up thumb. Jimmy G threw 2 picks against the Titans. The Titans should have lost that game if Jimmy G could have played slightly better. Just not so much great, slightly better. Yes, I think the 49ers are a good dark horse pick, but not at all based on Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo is a person who won a game by having